Well, yes, that's the matter that's going to be occupying our minds this morning. The appointment of a new chair for the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission. They were saying that this time around the president is not opting to have an acting, in acting capacity. He's going straight he sent the name to the Senate, and anytime soon they should be conducting a confirmation hearing as to whether or not he'll eventually assume the position as substantive chair. The question is, what are the issues, what are the matters that will be before him, even as this administration continues to maintain that one of its thrusts is fighting corruption? We have with us this morning Mr. Evie Richards, who is the Executive Director of Corruption Observatory. You're welcome to Sunrise Daily.
Thank you, Mark. Well, it's good to be here.
And it's good to see you in our studios in Abuja.
My first time. This place is beautiful, you know. Beautiful.
Well, you're welcome, sir.
Thank you.
You have seen and you've heard, you're right in the city where the appointment took place, this new chair for the EFCC. How are you welcoming this news?
Well, the first thing I did was to look at the profile of Mr. Bawa, very impressive profile. Been with the EFCC for about 17 years, was among the first cadet officers, highly literate, first degree in economics, second degree in international relations and diplomacy. Did a lot of cases for the EFCC, served around the country, had a zonal office that oversees the South states, those of the Southwest states, and the big fish, Lagos State itself, where he's currently serving. And also did the investigation for Desiani, you know, that big investigation. So profile is very impressive. One is tempted to be very hopeful that things will take a new turn. But my challenge all this while has been that it's not just about the people alone. You know, I take a look at Ribadu. Ribadu's case was a bit honorable because he was shown the way out through the back door, promoted and sent on course and all of that. Then came what's her name now? Beginning to forget the name now.
Oh dear. So,
the lady that came,
yes,
you know?
Waziri, I think.
Waziri. Yes. Waziri's case, I remember clearly when the then President Jonathan, after Waziri released her book, said that her case was a national embarrassment and was prepared to leave it as state secret. After that, Lamode came. Lamode was investigated for about 1.3 trillion. And then Magu came. You and I know exactly what has just transpired. That tells me straight ahead that there's a governance problem within the commission itself. And until those problems are properly sorted out, it's not just going to be about the people, the persons alone, but about the institution.
No, it is impressive that even though he's just 40, that immediately stood out. And you can see his young face being plastered all over the papers. Yeah. And some people will say that at least we're seeing some zest and vigor going to be brought into the EFCC. Yeah. And to think that he's been there for at least 17 years, it means it started out pretty early. And as one might expect for those, if you start out pretty early in an agency supposed to fight corruption, there is no way that one or two issues might not have cropped up in the manner in which you have fought corruption, so to speak. Yeah. And it would seem that that has already spawned some controversy, which they're asking the senators to address, and which they think could also affect his chances. But I don't know if you've come across any of those stories. Yeah,
on my way to this place this morning, I saw some of the headlines talking about issues. I've not seen the details.
Yes.
But essentially, that's why the Senate is in place, and that's the work that the Senate has to do. Look at the details, look at the merits about the accusations and all of that, eventually confirm or refuse to confirm. So the screening is instructive, and it should just come to play.
Indeed, we'll be looking forward to that. We also have with us this morning, joining us, our second guest, Mr. Daniel Bwala, who is special, well, it just says SA here. SA could be special advisor, I want to think that's what it is, to the Deputy President of the Senate on Legal and Constitution Matters. And he is on Zoom. Mr. Bwala, you're welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me.
Well, you have seen and you've heard the appointment of Mr. Abdurrashid Bawa as the new chairman of the EFCC. He's not been confirmed yet, but what did you make of the appointment?
Well, thank you for having me. I think when EFCC was established, the idea from the beginning, the conception was to model the commission after institutions abroad like the FBI, Federal Bureau of Investigation, where you are going to be having private-driven investigative detectives. But because at the time it was at this infancy stage, the police had to man it. And ever since convention continued to remain the same, police remain as the head of EFCC until this very moment. So his appointment now presents a paradigm shift for the reasons that I will state to you. You see, for the years that police officers were heading the EFCC oftentimes was criticized as a mere police outpost because of the administrative structure and then the character of the police brought into the EFCC. And that affected, for example, even in investigation, it affected administration, and sometimes even in operation, and which is where you find people oftentimes criticizing the commission as not obeying the rule of law in investigation, and even in adhering to the provisions of the Administration of Criminal Justice Act. For example, when you take a suspect to custody, the law is clear. You get detention order to keep him for 7 days. You renew it for another 7 days. And within this period, you have to make up your mind either to charge him. But in the past, you find that somebody will stay in the EFCC for more than 1 or 2 months, and which is the characteristic in actual sense of the police when you go to police station and all that. But these guys, the recently nominated person, Bawa belongs to a class called COS 1 in EFCC, the founding private detectives. And there was a lot of investment done by the government on these COS 1 people around the world to train them with National Crimes Commission, with FBI. So this is what I think is the paradigm shift. You are going to find in the coming days the EFCC moving to a direction where there will be strict compliance with the Administration of Criminal Justice Act. And in all of their operations and modus operandi, it must be consistent with the provisions of Administration of Criminal Justice Act and other extant laws. And I have a couple of advice for the new boss, because power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. For him to be able to succeed, there are a couple of things he will have to look into. For example, in administration, over the years, EFCC has been operating without staff regulations signed. This staff regulation where you discipline staff has not been signed. And in the past, when staff are dismissed for whatever reason, they go to court. The court has oftentimes struck out these staff regulation at the EFCC. So that portends a problem of structure. If you come to the issue of promotion, for example, you might be promoted 3 times in EFCC, but you remain on the same desk. So sometimes it presents this problem of whether or not you are progressive or progressing in the work that you're doing. Needless to also talk about issue that relates to probably transfer and all of that. But that's administration. In terms of operation, which is very fundamental to the Nigerian people, because that is what will reflect whether the fight is consistent with laws. This is where I believe that he will need to look at the legal department in EFCC. There is need for a reform of the legal department. They must be debriefed and then briefed into understanding that EFCC is to be modeled. Now, all of the training they got with FBI, with National Crimes Commission, must be put into play. And being that this is the first time that we're trying somebody that is not from the police background, it is incumbent of the man to ensure that all of the ideals are suggested, emphasized, and reinforced by our foreign partners are better applied in the EFCC going forward.
So you see a different, you see the EFCC going in a different direction as a result of the fact that there's been there seems to be a clear break from the police now being at the helm of affairs at the EFCC. That's what you're saying?
Take for example, in the area of investigation. I see that with this new leadership, if he must actualize, if he must practicalize, if he must bring to bear the training he received around the world, then investigation must first be thorough. You must not concede to the impulse of politicians or political office holders to run into politically motivated investigation, where, for example, circumstances that brought you to power, you want to please the circumstances that brought you to power, and therefore their whims and caprices is what you're looking at. You want to look at the interrelationship between the EFCC and other agencies of the government, and you want to factor, because in the case of the police, from 2003 or so, when EFCC was established till date, there has never been the prosecution or investigation that leads to a prosecution of a police boss throughout this period, because the EFCC chairman is above the rank of either assistant or commissioner of police. But in the police hierarchy, you have people above him. And that has created a very big problem for EFCC to be able to drive the process forward. But now, this is not a police person. This is a private detective trained and even armed. And then you have a couple of them in the EFCC. So now there is a release from the shackles of interdependency. So I see that he will have to look into it.
But Mr. Bwala,
he must...
Just pardon me, let me just chip this in before you go on. I mean, does he fulfill, because we see comments as to requirements of the appointment of the EFCC chairman. So from the point of law, does he fulfill that section 2, sub A, paragraph 1?
Yes, it does. You see, the confusion people often have is that they interpret that word, that the chairman must be about the rank, not below the rank of assistant commissioner of police or any of its agencies of the law enforcement. But what you don't know is that the cadet officers, which he belongs to that category, ever since they came in, they were trained by, in some cases with the DSS and some cases the army. And lately, they are armed. And don't forget that EFCC as a commission and people who operate in EFCC as operatives are performing the duties and functions of law enforcement. And therefore, EFCC qualifies as a law enforcement institution because they are enforcing anti-crime laws. But there are two prongs to the requirement. One, he must have cognate experience of 15 years or more. And that he has. I think he's about 17 years in that service, being that they were foundational detective members. And then the B part must not be below the rank of Assistant Commissioner of Police. His present rank as constituted is about that, or even a step higher than that. And then the third part, which is that he comes from a law enforcement agency of the government, and EFCC qualifies as that. So, for example, anybody who raises argument, it is debatable, arguable, but you can conveniently take that to the bank that people who come in as private detectives trained, if they fulfill the mandatory requirement of the number of years in the EFCC, they would have met the requirement of the other limb, which is that they belong to a law enforcement institution of the government. So it is proper, it is in order. But I will then add, for the avoidance of doubt, there is no problem about EFCC bringing a bill to the National Assembly for amendment that will then put it in a clear-cut manner so that there will be no need for ambiguity or that will give somebody a ground to go to court to challenge that. But in a nutshell, he met the requirement in Section 2 of the EFCC Act to be appointed as chairman of EFCC.
Perhaps what the law is referencing there is the fact that the job of investigation actually is supposed to be that of the police and not essentially about any other investigative agency. But let me take this to Mr. Xavier Richards. A number of things stick out to me, but let me begin from this one. And this is something, Mr. Xavier Richards, that you have also referenced earlier, and that's when you mentioned previous chairman of the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission. We saw the pattern in which some of them, as you said, one of them was showed out through the back door, using your words now, and a number of others like that. They went out in what everybody believes to be controversial circumstances. Now, nothing really has been done to review the system within which each of these EFCC chairmen have operated over time, both in acting capacity and in substantive capacity. Now, this new EFCC chairman is going into the same system, same way, and he's going to operate as well. Are you confident that it's not going to happen, it's not the same thing that is going to happen to him as the case of the previous chairman of the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission? Because, as some say, and you've also said it as well, corruption always fights back.
Well, truthfully, I don't think I would say I'm confident. I listened very carefully to Daniel, the other guest, and he raised a number of governance issues currently facing the Commission. I think the key word there is corruption risk assessment. Corruption risk assessment should be done on the Commission itself. If you watch closely, you will see that the issue of the management of the proceeds of crime came to the fore, and I think that was where both Magu and what's his name now, Lamode, became complicit. So that was one very, very, big risk in the Commission, the system itself that has just been looked at. And thank God an interministerial committee has been put in place to handle the management of the proceeds of crime. But that is just one. And there are several of them. For instance, if you look at how lawyers are selected, SANs are selected, the fees that is being paid, how investigations are done, at what point in the life of an investigation should the matter be taken to court, the list is endless. So there are several governance issues that should be properly reviewed within the Commission so that it becomes easy for any head of the Commission to have a smooth sail while in office. So I wouldn't say I'm very confident that Bawa's tenure will come and go and it will be hooray, hooray, hooray all through.
Let me quickly take you up on some of the issues. You have raised, some issues, internal issues confronting the EFCC in-house that would either make or mar the success of, Mr. Bawa as EFCC chair. However, there are also external issues in terms of how Nigerians currently view the fight against corruption. First and foremost, do you get the feeling at all that there is any fight going on against corruption?
Well, let me first speak to how Nigerians view the fight against corruption. They think it is dead. They think it's highly politicized. And they just think there's nothing real that is going on. And which is why some of us now are beginning to be elated by the appointment of Bawa not being a regular police person, a highly trained investigator and all of that. But the issue there is that the system is going into how strong is that institution. Look at the fact that see what happened to Ribadu. Can this institution be, separated from political interference?
That's a big question, because right now, I'm not going to remove that. I don't want to preempt what it is that people are going to read in the papers. There's already word out there. There was always a big controversy between the office of the EFCC chair and also the office of the AGF. Now, we understand that the AGF, that's the Attorney General of the Federation, has supervisory powers over the office of the EFCC. However, there's always been that you have supervisory powers, but you cannot interfere in the matters of the EFCC. The question is, there's been word out there now, how true that is, we do not know, that this is actually a nominee of the Attorney General of the Federation. And perhaps this could either help with smooth investigations and smooth running of the EFCC, or could cause a blockade or, a stoppage of certain things within the EFCC. Nonetheless, he has his work cut out for him. Nigerians will have certain expectations of him. How can he, as EFCC chair, begin to deliver on some of the expectations that Nigerians have of him, especially in the light of the fact that you just said that people think that the fight against corruption is dead?
It all has to do with strengthening that institution, strengthening the commission. And I repeat again and again, we have to conduct corruption risk on the commission itself. What are every agency that is out there in the private sector, you have managers for risk, all right? You have managers for compliance and all of that. So why don't we do the same thing in public sector agencies? It's not just the EFCC. There are several other agencies that have the same problem I'm speaking about. So that problem is rife and is glaring us, is glaring, is staring us at the face. That is the start point. That's where we should first visit. How strong is the EFCC itself?
How do they show their strength? How are they going to show their strength to say, we are a strong agency, we have capacity?
By putting systems in place, for instance, to deter political interference, to see that the issue of conflict of interest does not come to play and to destroy the mandate of the commission. Because how sure are you that a highly placed person within the commission could be nominating a lawyer that has that has affiliation to a particular criminal individual or something that is under investigation? How are lawyers selected? So the issue is endless, but there are some key ones that can be brought and be properly scrutinized to ensure that the commission, the institution becomes strong. I don't want to go into, look at what Trump was trying to do to, what do you call it now? The judiciary in the U.S. Much as he tried, that institution stood strong, and it didn't succeed. It's the same kind of thing we're looking at here. So the executive may want to play down hard on the EFCC, and even the leadership of the EFCC will be deterred by the strength of the institution itself, from making itself available to be used as just a tool in the hand of either the legislature or the judicial or the executive.
I'm going to pose the same question to Mr. Bwala. Mr. Evie Richards just said here that Nigerians think that the fight against corruption is dead, and that not much is going on in that regard. What do you think that the new EFCC chair must do to breathe life back into this fight against corruption?
Well, Nigerians must hear, and in my view, by the time Nigeria's story ends in time infinito, there will be a storybook about the success of Ibrahim Magu in anti-corruption fight. You can never take that. And you can see what he has achieved within the period. The new boss. So my belief fundamentally is that EFCC as an institution is strong. I will give you an example. When President Goodluck Jonathan was president, there was political influence on EFCC to investigate and prosecute people. They will do that because you are political office holders. The same in America. FBI, you can influence them at the beginning. When you leave power and another person comes to power, all of your dossier, they have it. That person can even use it against you. So the fact that when Jonathan was in power and Desani could control EFCC did not stop EFCC from investigating and prosecuting her. That is what is called institutional strengthening. The problem, however, has to do with the headship. And the greatest temptation that Bawa is going to face throughout his term is not the police. He has extricated himself from them by virtue of this paradigm shift. His greatest temptation, and that would come down to the question of Maokwe about the perception of Nigeria. I think that Nigerians will look at how Bawa and the institution of EFCC manage and interrelate with the Attorney General. Because one fact you can never take away is that the Attorney General recommended him. The president, I can tell you that, even though I can't say definitively, probably may not have known him from Adam. Attorney General recommended him. He's from Attorney General state. They have a history. They know each other. So there's no two ways about that. But the system is never built from the beginning to have FBI and Justice Department to have so much of friendship because it will interfere with the smooth working. It is meant to be a check and balance to each other. Even the office
Mr.
of the Attorney General has
sorry to
supervisory...
interrupt you. We have to take a break now. I'll let you finish your thoughts and your expectations and how he should navigate that when we come back from this break. Please stay with us.
This is Channels Television's breaking news.
Well, the news, just the breaking news indicates that gunmen have attacked Government Science College, Kagara, in Niger State, killing one student and abducting some others. Actually, armed men did attack that school. It's in Kagara in Rafi local government area of Niger State. At least one student is feared killed and several other students abducted. Some teachers and their family members residing within the college staff quarters were also said to have been abducted by the gunmen. A government source who pleaded anonymity disclosed this to Channels Television via telephone conversation in the early hours of Wednesday. Now, according to the source, the attackers were said to have stormed Government Science College, Kagara, at about 2 a.m. on Wednesday and started shooting sporadically. In the process, a student was killed while some others sustained gunshots. Some staff of the college and their families were also abducted from their homes during the attack. The source could not, however, give the number of persons abducted and those injured as at the time this report was filed and sent in to us. The source further said that gunmen were dressed in the same school uniform by the students, disguising to be members of the school. The latest attack comes barely 3 days after gunmen attacked a bus belonging to Niger State Transport Authority, that's NSTA, along Mina Zungeru Road and abducted at least 21 passengers. So that is the breaking news we've got for you right now. And as the events continue to unfold and as we get more details, we will bring them to you.
Well, in the meantime, of course, more confirmations definitely will come from that. But let me take this back, our conversation on anti-corruption back to you, Mr. Bwala. 4 institutions or 4 stalks come to my mind in this entire fight against corruption that we have been talking about over the years. One is the institution. Secondly, are the people who head the institution, the EFCC in particular, the people who head, that's the chairman. Third, are the legal frameworks and the legal institutions involved. And the fourth is the people. And I'm talking about Nigerians, regular or high-profile Nigerians and all of that. So in all of these, it would seem like many of these institutions, well, these 4 stalks seem to be working more at variance as opposed to working together. Sometimes even the institution and the individuals heading the institution, they don't particularly work together. That is why you would find certain powerful individuals being able to capitulate the persons who are heading this institution while the institution itself remains. And then the legal frameworks are not able to protect the head of the EFCC and the people that are seemingly just there. Do you see this as a challenge of merging, fortifying the vision of fighting corruption with these 4 stalks, or you think we should just go on the way we're going?
No. I do not think the conclusions you made, I do not think that is accurate. Now, first of all, earlier on you talked about investigation. You say it's only the police has powers. No. Everybody has power. Even you have power to investigate, and all law enforcement agencies.
What I said earlier about that, Mr. Bwala, is that the law assumed that only the EFCC will always be headed by a policeman because that's one of the primary responsibilities of the police.
So I'm saying to you that the law does not assume. Law makes provision. Assumption is where the law is not clear. But let me push it further to the point you have said. You see, the institution of EFCC and so many other institutions of government are strong. That is why, even if you influence them, when you are not in power, you will discover that you are unable to destroy the evidence that will also nail you. It is the strengthening of the institutions. And EFCC as a body is partnering with a lot of international foreign partners. And these foreign partners also serve as checkmate. For example, there is the FBI dimension, there is the NCA, and you have other counterparts. If EFCC begins to compromise financial intelligence, if EFCC begin to compromise assets and investigation, they are going to be checked by these agencies. And this is how the anti-corruption thing works. There is a global anti-corruption forum as well. When you bring it down to Nigeria, the temptation really has not been with the institute, because staff of EF, there are guys, I can be honest to tell you, that have staked their lives all these years for this work. They go to work early and they don't leave till midnight. Some on investigation, they risk their lives. And like these private detectives now, if you look at when we talked about this regulatory framework, if you turn the back of their warrant card, that is the identification, the detectives only, not admin staff, you will see that it is stated there, they have all the powers of a superior police officer. They can bear arms. So maybe the president will need to also look into that, to arm EFCC with specialized ammunition for the purposes of operations. But the greatest temptation has been, my brother, the leadership and his management of the agency against political office holders. Even in America, political office holders like president or anybody will always try to influence. It is how you resist it. Now, why that of Bawa is peculiar is because Bawa now comes from KB, where Attorney General comes from. Bawa was
Mr. Bwala, just a moment, Mr. Bwala. Should that be an issue? I'm trying to situate this with the strength of the institution that you talk about and the process that should throw up leadership naturally as opposed to depending on political stocks. Because there is no doubt from what you have also said, the political influence is has always played a role with previous economic and financial crimes chairmen. And that is how come it seemed that things went the way they always went with each one of them. So if an EFCC chairman is thrown up by a political influence, don't you see that same EFCC chairman falling by the same way?
Well, from the security strategic point of view, and I can tell you that because I consult for security agencies, is that if as the chairman, from the first time attempt is made to influence you, you outrightly reject, what happened to James Comey by Donald Trump will happen to you. He will fire you. And he brings another person, he fires him. He brings another person, he fires him. And if that person is subject of investigation, or that you need to work to also investigate him and his cronies, by the time you begin to post resistance at the first instance, we may end up not having people that will stand and build that institution. So we are saying minimize the risk. You can never eliminate the risk totally. Then secondly, you make mention of issue. You say should that be the point when I was talking about his relationship with the Attorney General. In an ideal situation, it ought not to be. And I do not think, and I do not hope that he will allow it to be. Now, his greatest temptation is that Attorney General that recommended him is also the supervisory body of EFCC, just like the Justice Ministry over the Justice Department over FBI. Now, how does he manage? And I will tell you the point of temptation. Attorney General is Attorney General, but he's also a politician. And as politician, any politician has the right to mix with other politicians. Most of the politicians in Nigeria are subject of investigation, or they pose the risk of being investigated in the future. So you are going to find a situation where somebody who knows Attorney General and who is being investigated by EFCC will want to get the influence of Attorney General to whittle down investigation on himself and many other issues. Now, if Attorney General is not a politician but a strict practitioner, then we don't even need to talk about it. But because he's a politician, you can't stop him from meeting with politicians. How will this chair manage this kind of situation? Because 80% of politicians and public office holders that are subject of investigation in Nigeria have the pedigree, the financial wherewithal to relate in the capacity of the Attorney General. So how does he manage? Now, he can strengthen himself by emphasizing over and over again that the supervisory powers of the Attorney General over him is in Section 174 without more, which is that you can institute, you can take over, and you can discontinue a case that is started by EFCC. But you can never affect their administration. You should never affect their investigation. You should never affect their operations. And you should never demand that intelligence leading to investigation, intelligence leading to operation, or even prosecution should be supplied to you. Because there is no way Justice Department will demand that from FBI. Justice Department only comes into play where FBI operation is running inconsistent with the provisions of their laws, and especially in the application of FISA. Now, FISA court, like where you go to FISA court and get order to then begin to place surveillance on private citizens. So Justice Department wants to be sure you are consistent with the law, because all of the applications oftentimes are done by ex parte. The other party is not there to defend.
But Mr. Bwala, in this case, pardon me, in this case, should there be any need for us to worry, whether he's a politician or he's a lawyer, because the laws guiding operations and all of these things are clearly spelled out?
Right. We don't need to worry, but in Nigeria, we have to worry. The same thing as I'm speaking to you now, if I go into politics, I beg that the media should worry and begin to say, we need to checkmate. The idea behind the media being the fourth essence of the realm is to ensure that without prejudice to being a politician, you do not use political. I'll give you a good instance. Recently, you remember when the National Assembly invited the president. Wrongly, they said, instead of inviting, they said they ordered and summoned the president. That Attorney General was said to have jumped into the stage and begin to declare that they do not have the power. Constitutionally and under a normal legal framework, it is not the duty of Attorney General. It is the legal officer or legal advisor of the president, because the invitation is extended to president in his capacity as a person and as a president. Where Attorney General would have come in is where this thing has created a dispute, where National Assembly is going to court. Usually it is the National Assembly versus the Attorney General of the Federation.
Okay.
So that thin line of understanding limits is what we are going to be looking at and checking.
All right, we'll come to Mr. Evie soon, but Mr. Bwala, the response you gave about the position of the law is equivalent to his appointment, people are still talking about that, but hopefully we'll come back to that if we still have time. But there are still questions about some things that are not so clear to a lot of people. They ask, for instance, you remember that the former chairman, Magu, was not confirmed all the times that was tried. And now that the presidency is seeking this confirmation, does it make rubbish the previous stance on all of those points of law that they had raised as to why they didn't need to confirm the acting EFCC chairman?
At the time, all of this legal opinion about the National Assembly didn't need to confirm was superfluous. And I think it was prepared and supplied to the vice president at the time, given the exigency of the event. But the Constitution is clear about the requirement for the confirmation. It's under the doctrine of separation of power. Anybody that will act in a capacity of the executive at a certain level that will affect national security will require congressional confirmation. Because the idea is that if he does not have, that means foreign agents can influence the executive branch of government and bring threats to the national security of the country. So it is a fundamental requirement by the Constitution that the president will nominate, and it is subject to the confirmation by the National Assembly. It means if National Assembly rejects that nomination, the president will drop the person and bring another person, but cannot impose. However, their rejection of a candidate must be cogent and compelling. It cannot be guided by political feeling. And at the time, Magu was refused because of so many things. Some of the problems were created by the National Assembly being angry with him, and some were created by his own way of interrelationship with people. So, but this one, his name was sent straight up to be confirmed as a substantive chair. And we have a National Assembly that if the president say, hello, they will say hi immediately, no objection. So you are not going to find a problem in the confirmation of this of Bawa. And Bawa, let me be honest with you, is a very experienced and highly disciplined and trained person. I have absolute confidence that Bawa will do a good job. I am only saying Bawa needs to check these things because this will define his administration. whether or not he manages his work in its interrelationship with the Office of the Attorney General.
On the lighter note, Mr. Bwala, I wonder what your principal, the DSB, will think about that point. You say when they say hello, they will say hi. But let me get Mr. here on this one. Well, as someone just listening and watching, and of course concerned about how we approach our fight against corruption, looking at the appointment questions concerning some of those allegations making the rounds, whether they're true or not, and what they expect of the National Assembly or Senate with respect to clearing him on this one. Do you then think that, look, whatever is being said out there, you still think that at the end of the day, it's about what he brings to the table, or what is your impression about how all of this will affect our quest to ensure we keep track on fighting corruption?
Well, I'll go back again to the issues that I raised concerning strengthening of the commission itself. Mr. Bwala, I remember some time ago, a notable Nigerian said that if you put an angel in charge of the NNPC, the angel will be corrupt. You know? And straight ahead, that person was talking about how strong the systems within the NNPC is. There is this thing we call the social and economic impact indicator of organizations. That's how Nigerians perceive the success or failure of an organization. The values that the EFCC bring are the rule of law, economic development, good quality of life, brought to bear through reduction in internet fraud, reduction in terrorism financing, reduction in abuse of power, and all of that. So if the system is not strong enough, Nigerians don't want to know whether the person in power is Bawa or is Magu, or they just want to see that the internet fraud is not as high as it used to be. Abuse of power is low. Terrorism financing is low. EFCC will now be scored high. The moment those things are still glaring and all over the place within the outer society, Nigerians will score the commission low. And this is the point I'm making.
Yeah,
now,
but
for you
Mr.
to be able to achieve a reduction in internet fraud,
you know, Mr. If I could just bring this in before you proceed, pardon me. You know, when you say that is what Nigerians want to see, but if I could borrow a leaf, or perhaps from what Mr. Bwala had said about politicians being in certain offices, he even said if he's there, then they may need to worry. If politicians have a thing or two on whoever is in that kind of position, should we then expect that it will be, I mean, everything will go on well, or because there are those who will think, look, he'll be beholden to certain people. Shouldn't that be a source of concern?
You know, I'm not sure if there is a particular panel that should be nominating the chairman or the chairperson of the EFCC prior to the nomination by the president to the legislature. But one thing I want to react to, if that kind of panel exists and the Attorney General is part of that panel, it is straight ahead a matter of question of the conflict of interest for him to have had any kind of input at all toward the nomination of Bawa. Why do I say this? First and foremost, they are from the same state. Second, he is the supervisory officer to that commission. Third, they may have had some kind of personal relationship now or in the past. So it's a question of conflict of interest if he has any hand in the nomination. Now, the question you are asking is, if I speak to that, there is no gift that is free. You know, no matter how you want to argue it, every gift has an expectation, a return. And no matter how strong the person of Bawa might be, and given the fact that the commission is not that strong, I do not see the possibility at all times that Bawa will be able to resist completely the interference and the influence that the AG and his lieutenants and friends and politicians might bring to bear on the commission. That's the way it is in anti-corruption, and that's the way the law is. So all issues concerning conflict of interest must be properly identified and managed so that it does not begin to negate the mandate of the commission
could you,
in the future.
It's a little confusing.
Conflict
So,
of interest here in the...
sorry, I just wanted to just quickly...
I just wanted a bit of expatiation on this conflict of interest. The interest of the Attorney General, as far as Nigerians are concerned, should be to uphold the rule of law. The interest of the EFCC chairman is to fight corruption, which also, and according to the law as well, which is also upholding the rule of law. Where is the conflict coming from?
If we look at antecedents, if we look at the issue that cropped up between Magu and the AGF,
Indeed.
not the past AGF, the current AGF, then we now look at the fact that the current appointee is a nominee of this AGF. Not just being a nominee, they come from the same state.
The point I'm trying to make, I'm sorry to interrupt you, we've seen this conflict. I'm not naive to the fact that, we've seen this kind of conflict crop up before, even before allegedly Mago and this current AGF. We saw it with Ribado and then Attorney General Michael Ondaka. And we saw how that eventually played out. And nonetheless, that was because there was conflict of interest in terms of who should be prosecuted and whether or not they should even be prosecuted at all. Ideally, if the Attorney General's office is to, push the interest of the law in stricter sense, so talking about, the country, with the country at heart. And also the chairman of the EFCC is doing that. Should any conflict arise in the first place? That's the question I'm asking.
The key word you use there is ideally. Ideally. In the free world where things work, where institutions are strong, no one will raise these concerns. But in our own climb, it's not as free as we want it to be. A lot of things are subjective. People have personal interests, and they could go a long way to fulfilling those personal interests. That's why our own anti-corruption tools must also take into cognizance our immediate culture, our immediate perception, and all of this must be brought to bear as to who is heading the EFCC. If the AGF is the supervisory officer, the AGF should not be part and parcel of the panel nominating an officer to head the EFCC. Don't forget that the EFCC can investigate the AGF and convict the AGF. But that on the one side. On the other side, these two persons now come they come from the same state. They've been together for quite a while. Who has the DSS investigated the relationship between Bawa and the AGF in time past? You see, and that brings me to the real problem that Nigerians have. The system of Nigeria is such that agencies operate in silos.
That's going to be another issue, because we see how very guarded. There was some conflicts at some point between the office of the DSS and that of the EFCC. I think there was a time that they were investigating a former DG of the DSS, and we're going for his arrest under Mago. And you could see just how very strongly the DSS resisted that. And we also saw how it was the DSS report that seemed to have done Mago in with the 8th Senate. So it would seem that not all is very clear in terms of who should do what and whose responsibility is what. However, when we talk about the office of the EFCC chairman, some people also believe that he needs to be checkmated. Otherwise, he could become, as somebody already pointed out, power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely. Don't we stand a risk with that?
A lot of risk, that's exactly what I'm saying. If we were to be running an ideal system, by now a file would be before the appropriate committee in the Senate, or at least before the Senate chairman, a dossier about the life of Bawa, the 17 years he has been with the EFCC. Is that one existing? I don't know. If it has to exist, it has to come from the DSS. So there has to be an interagency collaboration to have a seamless, flow of these activities. Now, the fact that Magu was not confirmed was more or less because of the information that the DSS put forth. You see, Magu was not confirmed by the then Senate. This present Senate that has confirmed a lot of people, he didn't also confirm Magu. Me and you were not privy to those issues that were raised, but there must have been issues that, are very, very key to national embarrassment and national development.
But I take it that you're very hopeful about the appointment of this new chair, are you?
Yeah, given the profile that I've seen thus far, I'm just hoping that when it starts, it should be able to rejig the system.
It's a fine place to leave it. We have to thank you so much for coming on the program. Mr. Evie Richards is the Executive Director of Corruption Observatories and speaking with us here in our Abuja studios. We also had with us Mr. Daniel Bwala, who is the Special Advisor to the Deputy President of the Senate on Legal and Constitution Matters, joining us via Zoom. Thank you so much for speaking with us this morning.